I'm going to chat through, I guess, overcoming the internal business challenges with looking around tech adoption. And when I'm talking about tech adoption, I'm talking about for procurement teams, so for tools for procurement teams to use, and how to socialise these concepts within your business so you can actually reach that end goal. So that's what I'm going to touch on. Before I walk through our topic, a little bit about me. I'm the Strategy and Development Manager for Felix. We're a Brisbane-based technology company, and we deliver source-to-contract solutions to small and large organisations, government, private. Very quick sort of timeline of our business, because I think it's great for context. We have another platform or product called plantliner.com.au, and I guess just a quick story on that. Our CEO, Michael Trusses, or co-CEO and co-founder, Michael Trusses, is a civil engineer by trade. I think it was early 2012. He was working up in Moranbah as a civil engineer and was living that upfront sort of sourcing headache. So for a lot of procurement people on the road, working for a very decentralised organisation where sites and projects could go and source and run their own activity. So through doing that, had a light bulb moment when he bought a car on Hilux on carsales.com in about 10 minutes and said, why isn't there this public marketplace that I can go and look for plant equipment, which was the original pain point. So we went and developed that platform. It's still a successful business in its own right, and it's a public RFQ tool for you that matches you up via a smart matching algorithm with viable candidates for hire equipment or subcontractor trades. Mid-2014, we founded Felix, and that was, I guess, the purpose of running through this is it's just been, everything that we've done has been very market-led. It's been people coming to us and saying, hey, we really like the interface and we like this technology, but we want it for our own suppliers. So everything we've developed and everything we're doing today and the new features and improvements is all very much customer-driven and prospective customer-driven as well. So we're going to continue on the roadmap to the summit today. So a few, I guess, key steps, and it's probably worth noting that these are some, I guess, observations that we've had from our end as a vendor. It's really exciting to, I guess, hear about the stuff around AI and blockchain and where this fits in nicely. These are some of the steps that you could sort of be starting to take now, to prepare for those changes. A couple of key themes is that procurement tech adoption is quite broad. This is a process that could be that if your business is going out for a full source-to-pay tool, or a more bespoke solution for managing documents for a particular project. So I think these steps are relatively universal. And obviously every business is slightly different. So again, this is a bit of a blueprint, but you get the gist. I guess a final thought bubble is, due to the time at hand, if we want to chat through any of these particular steps in more detail, we'll be outside and ready to roll. So first one, we're going to chat through Basecamp, which is the acknowledgement of a problem, and what does that look like? What's your business's existing relationship with technology? Because it can be interesting to go and actually talk to other business units and understand that. Change readiness, understanding the solutions, selecting a partner. I'm loving I guess I've heard over the last couple of days, a lot of people referring to their suppliers as partners, and it's really refreshing. Implementation, go live, and what does a successful rollout look like, and where to from there. So, where is the summit? It's probably worth stating what we see as the summit, and I guess there's a few key characteristics, which is time and budget requirement are met, highly engaged stakeholders, solution that meets your key objectives and solves the problem that you set out to solve. You never want to lose sight of that problem, and driving real and measurable business outcomes. So, how do we get to the summit? Our first step is at Basecamp. Staying here overnight by the looks. And the first step is what is the problem, first and foremost? So it's clear to define that. You can let the following steps that we're going to go through sort of more tightly define your problem, but I think you've really got to have that sort of core high-level need. Are you wanting to improve compliance? Are you looking to gain transparency over spend from, if you're trying to merge from a decentralised function to a centralised function or vice versa, or simply increase productivity. So what are you looking to achieve? The first step is understand the implications. Are they financial? Like, are you just burning cash? Is it risk-based, because you open yourself up to the risks? How many business units does it affect? I think on during the previous presentation, it's like, what's the impact on the coal face? It's really important to understand, and because it needs to be worth fixing for starters. So next one is to notify relevant stakeholders. So initially, this is, I guess, a bit of a sanity check to make sure that what you're looking to do is, has some legs. You don't want to sort of get too far down the line and then all the other people in the business sort of perk up and go, what have you been doing? And I guess alert the appropriate level of management. And the reason this is important is so you get some validation up front, so that when you come to them potentially asking for resources, they're aware of the problem and they've sort of acknowledged that it's something that you need to address. And also form a focus group. And again, these are all quite I was going to say fluffy activities, but the idea of forming a focus group is allow people in who are close enough to the problem that you want to fix, but passionate about fixing it. So make sure you align yourself with the right people internally. A couple of, I guess, key challenges, and I won't touch on everything that's on the screen, but I think like I heard the term before from Jeremy, don't try and boil the ocean, which I thought was quite cool. That kind of sums it up. So again, the more stakeholders you have coming into the room, the wider the problem gets and the scope creep, and no, you're never going to solve anything. So bite-sized pieces is really effective. So we've acknowledged the problem. Now it's about saying, all right, well, the next step is how does our organisation react to technology? The reason this is an important step for us, and I'm not sure how much technology each of your respective organisations uses, but we work with businesses that are starting from ground zero and have, a very basic accounts payable system or finance system. Then we're also, working with businesses who are, quite well established. So, what is your business? Are you a technology graveyard where, platforms might go to die? There can be no appetite to implement any further tools because you might have been burned in the past. Are you big green behind the ears, like late adopters? Then that was probably an example I gave before, where you might just have an accounts payable system that's like, where to from here, and running Excel and email outside of that. Or are you trying to potentially bring something into like an existing ecosystem that is just going to solve a new need, but your business is relatively receptive? Probably the main challenge that we see our clients face is that middle one, that change fatigue. It's a very real thing. Depending on how aggressive your sort of innovation strategy might be, you really don't want to burn people out because they'll just get sick of it. So change fatigue is one to be wary of. So, change readiness. So we're at Camp 2, and we're about to sort of get into the hairy stuff. This is assessing your business, profiling your business to say, well, are we going to be able to react to this change? So, first of all, there needs to be a level of a needs analysis to review your current processes. Prior to that, there is a recent report from the Hackett Group that 84% of procurement teams agree that digital transformation will be vital in the very near future, but only 32% have actually developed a strategy for getting there. Software is a key element. However, realistically, software is purely a facilitator of good process. So it's about doing a needs analysis on how do we operate right now. If we bring a tool in to support a broken process, it's not going to really do anything for you. So a needs analysis, a decision-making framework, and this is more, I guess, for your own benefit again as to what this looks like. How are you going to reach a verdict? What are the dependencies, and do they link to one another? Are they financial? Well, of course, there's going to be a budget that has to come into place somewhere. Do you have an innovation budget that you didn't know was lying around, something you could tap into? Is it going to be linked to a project? Unsure. But also some external factors, like is your supply chain, like suppliers and subcontractors and service providers, actually mature enough? So there's a lot of elements to that you want to address. And probably the biggest one is like the willingness of other business units. So making sure that they're, I guess, along for the ride with you. So understanding the solutions, and I guess a key theme that I'll quickly point out, relevant just to this slide, but you'll notice each of the steps that we're going through, you can't really get to we see a lot of people try and start at this step, and they've sort of formulated like a really potentially rigid scope in their head and they just go straight to market. Like you really need to do some of that internal analysis before you actually try and assess the market, because there's just so many platforms, so many tools out there now that could do what you like, or what you need rather. So understanding the solutions. The history, I guess, when we talk to, we deal heavily with procurement teams. It's usually where our conversation starts. But history would suggest that procurement teams have not really led the charge in respect of like digital technologies. They opt instead to just ride on the coattails of like a wider implementation, maybe that was run by operations or another business unit. So our experience shows that procurement's almost take a wait and see approach, and that's largely due to the vast array of platforms. So understanding what's out there is really important. So there's plenty of ways to find them. Of course, you've got your Gartners, Google. There's plenty of ways to find these platforms. But I'd encourage you just to talk to your procurement counterparts from different organisations, because not one of our clients uses our tool in the same way. So there's so many different ways you can skin the cat these days. So it's important to understand what other people are doing. A key one, so just to walk through a couple of dot points, is really let vendors sell to you. We've seen a real shift just in the last 24 months of, hey, here's a rigid scope, and please respond in these, in these boxes. Instead now doing a bit of a market sounding exercise and saying, all right, well, what's out there? Come in, give us a demo, and let's go from there, and then run a bit of a shortlisting exercise post that. So I'd really encourage to let vendors sell to you. But also be prepared to clearly articulate your problem, with data, stats, etc. Create a shortlist. I mean, we do this all the time, so we know that it's a competitive exercise for the businesses that approach us. But I think there was one that we did that we won, which is great. That with 16 global vendors, and there was a shortlist, 3 or 4 times. The vendors want your business, so they'll go through the process with you, as long providing you're transparent. And I think also just at this early stage, keep your scope reasonably flexible, because your dealings with the various software providers out there can actually help define your scope once you understand what's possible. So keep your scope reasonably flexible. So selecting a partner. I mentioned before that it's been really refreshing to hear that word used when you're talking about your suppliers, because it really is a partnership. That's how we view it at Felix. Like our clients, it's more of a service. Although we provide a product, it's very much a services type contract where there's a real partnership involved. So the courting period is over. It's time to select your partner. And the first step is and I almost think this is a step that because you're sort of understanding the functional elements by this point. You know what you want a tool to do. They can all do it maybe to 70, 80%, but you really want to start looking at the non-functional elements, because they're so critical, and they sort of almost are a bit of an afterthought in a lot of these processes. So, what's their training? What's their after-sales support? Where is their support based? What's their team like? I mean, the cultural alignment is a really, really vital thing when you're talking about, when you're looking at software adoption. Consider the vendor's product roadmap. That's kind of similar to the cultural alignment, but more strategic alignment. Tech's changing. Like, we just listened to the presentations on AI and blockchain, and I don't know if I'm scared or excited or both, but it's just changing so rapidly. So if you don't have an understanding of what their offering could look like in 1, 3, 5 years, it can be a bit short-sighted. Formulate your ideal use case, and what I mean by that is the modern technology, and we know there's some great big ERP platforms out there that probably have a bit of a rigid connotation, but the there's so many good tools out there now that you can actually mould and make malleable to suit your needs. So understand how you can use that tool day one. Does it mean you're just biting off a bite-sized chunk and then rolling out in phases? So formulate that ideal use case. And also get a really clear view on what implementation is going to look like. I think it was Krishna from Mirvac mentioned yesterday, some IT projects take 4 years before they go live, and the world changes like tenfold in 4 years' time, and by the time the platform goes live, it's redundant. So you want to understand whether, how rapidly can they implement, what are you going to expect day one, what can you get day two? So the implementation is a really key part. And what are their project management methodologies, because it's really key. And I guess also, request transparency from your vendors, and I think it's what, I know we are very transparent in our process, but give that same courtesy and let them know where you're at with the process. Key challenge in this one is probably fearing buyer's remorse, because all the tools are going to have a number of elements that are just you really, really want, but you may not be able to have everything. So it's just sort of overcoming that. So implementation, we've selected our partner, see there, and we're going to go through the process of implementing the platform into our business. So first of all, and this part of this process would have been done upon selection, but devise that project plan, which again should be partly done already. I think I've got a couple of key steps that I can just touch on, because we come from the vendor and we sometimes assume that buyers are aware of these processes, but it's a simple thing like a scoping or more of a scoping session, which is a deep dive into actual configuration. Requirements gathering is the next step to then go back to your business and capture the information you need from relevant business units. Are we digitising a template that's currently used by someone in the field? Who's the owner of that? Who governs that tool? That current form? Technical and functional configuration, which comes back to the vendor, and we carry out that activity. All of these steps have varying timeframes, by the way. A user acceptance testing, so if you don't see that anywhere in an implementation plan, ask some questions, because there's I know for our business we do a pre-UAT, we do a guided UAT, then we do a UAT where they're off on their own. So it's a really critical piece, because the findings from that, you come out and actually make the changes or address the impacts before you go live. And then of course key user training is pretty vital. Address your business, so internally, who needs to know about what you're doing that you haven't alerted already? Are staff aware of what's around the corner? Build some anticipation, build some excitement. And also, what documentation do you actually need to update in wake of this implementation? What do you need to be communicating to everybody? Really, one that's really close to our hearts, coming from running a public marketplace through which we commercialised it through the suppliers, is addressing your supply chain, because their engagement with a tool, whether it has a vendor interface or not, is really, really vital, and it can make the whole tool redundant if they're not engaged with the concept. Because you treat them like any other stakeholder, let them know. We do a series of sort of comms plans and primer emails ahead of an implementation, so the vendors are very well aware of what benefits they may derive from the system, what it's going to do. And I've just got a point just on phased rollouts, because I think, again, with modern technology, there's the ability to, I guess, really pick and choose what you'd like, or how you'd like it to look. And that could be by module, by project, not one project, but using the full end-to-end solution. By geography, you want to roll it out in one state before you go enterprise-wide, or potentially by supply category, so you might want to roll it out for one particular category. Just checking on the time. So any of these ways can be a great way to dip your toe in the water without having to go full enterprise-wide, and it can look more palatable to a CFO who's trying to get all this money from. So go live, so implementation's taking place. Go live is typically the handing over of the platform, going, here's the keys. What it doesn't necessarily mean is you go wide to the full business, but it's when you have access to the platform. So key one is to, and again, you probably want to sort of start at this process, but it's here we want to define them, is establish those success benchmarks and capture data. So have some ways of doing that planned in your head. or planned out rather. That could be quantitative, like X number of vendors onboarded, or we saved X amount of money on this particular category in the first 6 months. Or they could be qualitative. Is it based on vendor happiness or user happiness? Encourage feedback is like really, really huge, especially in the first 3 to 6 months. And it could be as simple as a user survey to ensure that they're enjoying the tool. But there could be also some sensitive business units that you need to actually approach and handle with care and sort of one-on-one and say how's this change impacting your day-to-day. And another great point that was referenced in the previous presentation is to have some sort of governance and controls in place so that once it's gone live and changes do need to be made, because vendors will react to change, who's managing the prioritisation of those updates and changes. We're working on one infrastructure project in Melbourne that has 8 zones, and there's thousands of people that are, well, not thousands of people on the project, hundreds that have access to the tool, and they now have a key champion on each zone that then brings the findings back to the main champion, and it's a really, really effective process, and which kind of ties into that continuous collaboration with your technology then partner, which is don't be afraid to air out the dirty laundry. You want to, if there is problems, you want to address them early and often. So keep that thing moving. Just to one of our final ones is we're reaching the summit. So we've got those sort of key characteristics. First of all, you've been capturing that data, so it's time to use it, because you actually may have missed the summit. You mightn't have this successful implementation you thought you have, so you've got those qualitative and quantitative success metrics that you established. If you did fall short, first of all, was it general adoption? Was it lack of top-down support? Was it functional? Was it buggy? I'm not sure. But what's the magnitude? Set an action plan and then follow through. And again, that sort of ties into the collaboration with your software partner. Or if you have reached the summit, it's time to smell the fresh air at the top of the mountain and just establish what your next steps are. Is it about wider adoption, additional functionality? But a really key one is having a plan in place for continued use of the tool, because when it's not brand new and shiny, it can sometimes drop away. So have a plan in place to make sure that continues. With a fair bit to have just sort of gone through in that amount of time. So we do have a blog series that we're sort of fleshing out these individual camps and base camps in more detail. So if you're interested, please jump onto our blog. The organisers can probably share across a link. And also, I'd hate to have to drink it myself. There's a lovely bottle of red at our stall outside. So if you want to drop your business card in, feel free. Any questions?
I was going to say, what's the importance or the value of having somebody in-house working in a software company, and what role is your organisation doing that in terms of educating the users of that software, which is often very close down?
Yep. So it's really a case by case for when we deal with our organisations. And just so I'm understanding the question correctly, you're saying on the org side, do you need someone dedicated to, I guess, manage that project?
Yeah, and training and educating users of that.
Yep. I think that we almost go back to the step when you're selecting a partner. I know part of our offering is on-site secondment and like continued support, however much required. We'll just resource that. But in saying that, we've also worked in situations where they've employed a business analyst as well as a project manager. To have someone there on the ground, at least for that initial 3 months, is really, really important. And that's just based on experience. Where we haven't had that, or we haven't really had a champion, like an opposite number, who was really driving as much as we thought they were, it can very quickly slip away. But on the flip side, it can be really easy to bring back with the right support from upstairs. If that answers your question.